Melissa DeHart here, and thank you for joining me on the coaching studio. It is my pleasure to introduce my guest today, Fran Fisher. Fran is a visionary leader, international speaker, author, and an MCC with the International Coaching Federation. Fran is one of the first pioneers and champions of professional coaching. She served as a founding ICF executive board member and was the chair of developing the credentialing paths for both coaches and for coach training schools. She has been serving ICF as a PCC and MCC credentialing assessor since 1998. Imagine a world where everyone is enjoying a rich and fulfilling life, living true to their essence, life's purpose and values. This is the vision that Fran holds for all of us. She believes the world needs people to be their best authentic selves, and that becoming a coach and becoming the best coach that you can become is what will help to transform the world around us. Her book, Calling Forth Greatness, 7 Coaching Wisdoms for Transforming Lives, has a great book review. Fran Fisher delivers the greatest hits of coaching wisdom in a single, easy-to-read book. It's all here, the guided principles used by great coaches every day. My favorite section is about living from the inside, aligning your vision, purpose, core values, and empowering beliefs. Call forth greatness and transform your life. Read this book. Fran is also an adventurer who in 2016 went to Spain and walked the Camino de Santiago as a personal challenge as well as a vision quest. She now lives in Colorado with her sweetie and continues to share her wisdom with coaches around the world. Fran, thank you so much for being on the coaching studio.
Thank you, Lisa.
I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely welcome. Well, I would love to start with, you're a founding member of ICF, so I know you've been a coach for a while, but what led to your journey into coaching?
Well, that's actually an epic story. How many lifetimes shall I go back for the beginning? So fast forward to 1989. I was in circumstances that really reduced me to a breakdown in my workaholic pattern, okay? Workaholism. And I called it my final fry out.
I love that.
Yeah. I've been trying to heal that addiction for many, many years in many ways. But this was the final fry out. And it took me, excuse me, to the Oregon coast, walking the beach for a week. And I started with realizing, swallowing that bitter pill of truth that I had brought this on myself. I couldn't blame anyone else. I had employers who would pat me on the head and say, I know, I hear you that one person can't do this job. But I was the fool, Lisa. I just kept doing it. Mm-hmm. And then blaming them for letting me run my racket, So I walked that beach and I swallowed that bitter pill of, I've done this to myself. I've ruined my health, my relationships, my career. And so then I started drawing on the 2 decades of personal growth work that I had done, the 70s and the 80s. Every book, every tape, every personal growth, transformational, you name it. I was the transformational personal growth junkie. So I started drawing on that. And the bottom line was that every wisdom speaker, every guru said, you have to put yourself in the center of your life. You have to do that. And I hadn't had the courage to take that leap of faith up until then. So I took inventory of my strengths, my values, and what I saw was that everyone else was benefiting from my demonstration of those except me. I was leaving myself out of the equation. So I went back into the toxic, dysfunctional environment where I was working, and with no backup plan whatsoever, I gave notice to my employer. I gave notice to my second husband. I had jumped into that too fast, and I hadn't been taking responsibility for it. It was time to clean up my life. And so I started taking action. And miracles started happening.
I love your energy.
So in these intervening years that I have been coaching, I've been there. I've done that. I have taken the leap of faith, and I facilitate people in discovering the essence of who they are and claiming it and owning it and taking a stand for it and taking those risks.
Yeah, it really sounds,
yeah.
I'm sorry, it really sounds like it comes though out of that personal journey. And I really appreciate, that the courage in what I'm hearing is that self-ownership. It's not them that is doing this to me. It's me who's allowing it. And I really appreciate that perspective, coming forth. How did that lead into coaching?
How it led to coaching was that I ended up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I had fried out and I wasn't working. I was on unemployment, and it freed me up to just look around for my healing process. It took a full year of unraveling a lot of mental addictive patterns without going in. I mean, that whole story is a book, So here I am, and I'm looking around for what's next, networking. And actually, you know what, Lisa, I'm going to share something really vulnerable and transparent here, because I think this would be a contribution to share today. What happened over that first year was that I was noticing what I was noticing to see what was next. And then I got sick, and I was really ill for about 3 months, and I had flu symptoms, and I couldn't seem to get over it. So there I was laying on the sofa one day, and I was reading a book, personal growth book. And I put it down on my chest like this. My eyes were closed. And I said, okay, Lord, show me. I've been doing my work. I don't know what else to do. I want a healing here, not just these flu symptoms, but this healing from these, addictive patterns. My eyes were closed, and I could tell that, and I was alone in the house. The whole room lit up. It was like it was flooded with light. And I opened my eyes, and across the room was a being of light, shaped like a human being, but very tall, very slender, and just exuding light. I wasn't afraid. And then this being of light, I call it, stepped toward me and held out a magnificently wrapped gift. It was beautiful, foil, colorful paper and ribbon. And, reached for me to receive it. And then a voice spoke, filled the room, kind of like an empty theater, how it kind of reverberates. And the voice said, Francis, that has to be either God or my mother.
Right.
Nobody,
It's
nobody
serious.
gets to, this is serious. Attention, Francis, I have already given you the gift. There is nothing you need to do to earn it. You see, workaholism is my identity is valued by what I do, not who I'm being.
Right.
Okay. And as soon as those words were spoken, there was a wave of energy, Lissa, from the top of my head all the way through my body, out my feet. And I had a knowing in that moment. The being of light was gone. I had a knowing that I finally got this in my bones, this being doing distinction. Because it was never safe to be me, starting with my family of origin. It wasn't safe. So I shut down and do in order to get, the paycheck, the feedback, the accolade, all the goodies. Except that it cost me so much. I got up from that sofa completely free of all those symptoms, the nausea, the aching muscles, gone. Now, this does lead to coaching, okay? Very shortly after I got up from the sofa, I remembered a woman who I had met networking. She was a hypnotherapist, and I had made a mental note that I'd like to become friends and reach out to her. So I invited her to lunch. We sat over lunch, and she found out that I knew a whole lot about marketing. She had a part-time job that she hated, and she asked me if I would help her design a marketing plan for her business. But she said, I can't afford to pay you. That's the problem. And I said, it works for me. We bartered hypnotherapy sessions for my healing. And she came to my house, and I started literally channeling my transformational process on that beach. Who are you? What are your values? What are your core strengths? What is the essence of who you are? That's your I am to claim and then to design your life so that you're living true to the essence of who you are in every aspect, every expression.
As you're talking, Fran, one of the things I'm kind of struck by, there's several questions that I really want to ask you right now. I think one of the things that I hear a lot when I'm working with new coaches is that the tension between showing up authentically and also, because you're a PCC and MCC assessor, showing up where they can also demonstrate their capacity to utilize these core competencies. How do you navigate that tension between authentically being there, and yet sometimes our authentic self is still stuck in maybe the telling and the doing and the helping versus the being? I don't know. I mean, so there's a question in there. There is a question in there.
There's a question in there, definitely, because I have those conversations all consistently with those I mentor. Mm-hmm. Consistently, that so it's a unraveling of our ego attachments and identities is really requires a lot of letting go and trusting who I'm being, a deeper trust in who I choose to be. And one of the tools that's been very successful that I've offered mentees is that when you prepare for a coaching session, choose your 5 qualities of being. Who do you want to be being? I offer this to my executive clients too. They're going into doing a presentation and they're all up in the head about what are the right words, how do I present this, following the PowerPoint that's here, just dropping down, trusting. And I'm looking over here because I have my 5 qualities posted right here. Who do I choose to be? And so maybe curiosity, because it's related to the skills, right, that we're working with, being curious rather than being the expert. What is it? So curiosity, fully present. What would be some other qualities?
Well, I think curiosity, full presence, I think are like probably sum up all of the other qualities, really being attuned and listening deeply and actively to the person that you're working with. And I'm really struck because I think that what I also am hearing is the distinction between our authentic self and our ego state. It's
Yes.
almost like the one is the being and the other is the doing, right? So like our authentic self is our being, our ego state is our doing. And a lot of coaches come into coaching, at least from my experience, because they really like helping people.
Right.
And that
Right.
helper piece is really, if I'm hearing you correctly, that helper piece is the part that's really attached to that ego state.
It's attached. That state is attached to, you've just triggered another piece that is so important, and that's to understand the empowerment paradigm such that what I want is not for myself, but for this person. I call it calling forth greatness, the greatness in that client. What would you rather have for your ultimate fulfillment? And this is another bit of a story, I think, to illustrate this, is that when I was in school, elementary, high school, I was valedictorian, 4-point. I had a lot of the students coming to me for help with their. When I got to coaching and I learned this paradigm, which really I resonated very deeply philosophically, but I connected with it. Like, yes, this is it. Then I look back and realized I was feeding my ego because I had the answers.
Yeah.
And this journey in coaching, going ACC, PCC, and on to MCC and beyond, is about feeding our soul.
Yeah.
That going for that level of fulfillment. And I can't feed my soul if I'm attached to being right, to being in charge, to being the expert. And I tell you, I wrestle with this myself because I'm a storyteller. Can you tell?
Can you tell?
I love telling my stories, and I have all these miracle stories to fill books of clients taking this leap of faith and letting go of those attachments and free falling in the trust in self. But we have to know who self really is at core, and that helps. And that's the essence of my work. I start there.
Yeah.
I start with, who are you? What is your I am? And how do you live true to that in every expression of your life?
Yeah. And that's just, I think it's just so, it's interesting. One of my very favorite books is a book by Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And it's that question, right? Like, who are you? Right? Like, that's the most fundamental question we can be asked or even ask of ourselves. Like, who am I? And am I the I that's right here? Am I the I that's on this camera? Am I the Lissa DeHart? Because if I'm Lissa DeHart, who was I when I wasn't Lissa DeHart? Who was I when I was before that? Right? Like, who was I when I was 5? If I'm, and it's just like, it's such an interesting inquiry into who we are. And again, that authenticity of our who we're being is so crucial, because the expertise that many of us are driven to get to. I mean, I know I'm like listening to you tell your story, and I'm thinking of just how much expertise everybody, myself included, are told we're supposed to have so that we can be of service to others. And it's really in this space of not knowing,
Yes,
right? In that space of
yes,
curiosity that
yes.
we can actually show up with another human being so fully. Yeah. I really appreciate your transparency and candor in sharing this, because I think this is a piece that's really the hardest part for people moving from, PCC to MCC, or from expert, from a transactional analysis perspective, right? You've got expert, maybe novice, or parent child, and it's the switching where we become the novice to our client's expertise.
I
How do
like
you
that.
how do
I like
you,
that.
when you're observing coaches, because I know you do a lot of that, how do you notice that they're at that capacity of letting go?
Well, they start demonstrating it in their coaching. They're making that shift to asking a curious question, a deepening question, one that evokes awareness for the client instead of the previous pattern, which is reflecting the word, summarizing what they just heard. It just keeps the conversation on this flat, it just keeps it flat, so when they start doing more of that in their practice, of course, we're celebrating, and they're beginning to feel, they're noticing what happens with the client. And then it becomes like so much easier to stay in that mode because of the benefit to the clients that are starting to show up. Like I suggest, here's an example. So in the past, all we ever did was we might ask the client, what are you learning? We might ask that question or notice they have an insight. I'm suggesting, I call this mining for gold. I'm suggesting you don't stop there, because we used to go straight to action then.
Right.
We used to go straight to action. So now I suggest, I encourage that we ask again, so what's bubbling up underneath that noticing you're having right now? What's there? Well, why should I ask that? They just told me. No, because how many times have you been the coachee and you're aware there's stuff going on down here and it never gets any light?
Right.
It doesn't get, because you're not asked.
Right. Or even if you say it, like, for instance, I mean, I think of it as trees falling in a forest, right? And if a tree falls in a forest and nobody's there to hear it, did it really make a sound? And it's oftentimes, I think the clients actually say it, but the coach doesn't hear it. So
Well, that
therefore
too.
it just sort of bounces out of the conversation, and it's lost to the client's capacity to anchor that awareness for themselves. And so, yeah, like, and we know, like, we have all the models, right? Like the iceberg theory, right? Like, we know that actions and results are the only things you can see, but it's all the stuff below the waterline that is where the real change needs to happen. So this delving below, and what's below that, and what's below that, I've been saying is so and it fits with what we all know. Yet that capacity to be the coach who can actually be in that space with another person.
And what comes to mind, Lissa, is silence, and just be silent, and, there's, give them a chance to notice, is there something else there? My coach does that for me, and I just keep going, but if I hadn't been asked, or if I hadn't had the space, we would have moved on, and that wouldn't have come to light
Mhm.
for me, for us
Yeah.
both. Yeah.
Having that reflective voice, or that partnership, right? To really do that exploration. And I think there's something that you said earlier that I want to kind of go back to, because you said, ACC, PCC, MCC, and beyond. And I think that's really crucial also, which is MCC isn't an end goal. So how do you see your own MCC journey?
Oh, well, this is exciting to share, and I haven't shared this with too many because it's new. It's coming up right now. I'm actually developing I'm not going to call it Beyond MCC, but that's what it is. I was already beginning to be aware of these next levels of, well, here's an example. We've been mastering being present with the client, right? This next level is mastering the art of presence, of being presence, not just in coaching, but in life. Like, this soul's journey, moving beyond getting the certificate, continuing that soulful growth journey of who I choose to be as a human being. That's where I'm going, and I'm developing that course right now.
How do you do that for yourself? Because I mean, developing the course implies that this is work that you've been
I'm
doing for
stretching
yourself.
myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have this voice that says, "Who do you think you are? You don't even know how you're going to do this yet." But it's wanting to be birthed.
Yeah.
So how I'm doing that is trusting and allowing this to emerge.
Yeah. And that's just beautiful, because I think that just really sums it up, right? Like, how do we trust in in our capacity to be fully present with other people and with ourselves? When you say presencing, I'm thinking of Theory U.
Oh, yes, exactly.
And it really speaks to what you were talking about before also, which is oftentimes we can see the pattern or the habit, but we instantly want to go to the performance piece, right?
Yeah.
But until we go down into that you and really explore how we're being, and how we're
Yes.
present with, through that head, heart, body experience, how we're being. Yeah, it's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. What do you think is like something that new coaches really would benefit from hearing from you?
New coaches.
Yeah, that are just coming out of school, or maybe have been coaching for a couple of years.
Um, Patience with their process, their learning. It's so often at that stage of the unconscious competence or unconscious incompetence. They're coming in, and now they're starting to become more aware of what needs to be mastered and developed, and it's uncomfortable. It can be so, and I deal with that with mentoring PCCs to MCC as well, because there's so much unlearning to do and new, and the practicing can be one step forward, two steps back, and it can be so discouraging, and it can trigger the inner critic. And so just be gentle with yourself in this process, and recognizing it's a learning journey, and be patient with yourself. And sometimes it takes longer. There's a goal, right, to get the whatever, get the
Certificate.
certificate, and I just love it when my MCC potential clients come to me and they say, "Okay, I want to apply for my MCC by the end of this year." And I just get this, you know. Like, oh, and I have gotten to the point where I've actually told some of my prospects or knew, that it has to happen in this certain amount of time. I said, I don't take on clients who have set that kind of immediate deadline for themselves. This is a process and it's going to take what it takes. And I see them relax into it and let go. You know what? If I have to renew my PCC, fine. Hallelujah.
Yeah, it takes
You
so
know?
much pressure off when you do that,
Yes.
with that choice. And I think that's such an important point too, which is when you put that kind of pressure on yourself, like I must get it done by this.
Uh,
Frankly, I did that to myself. It keeps you in that place of performance versus
yes.
being present. I think that the caveat for me was that I had a deadline that I wanted to apply by, but I didn't have a sense that I would pass. Right. So I wasn't attached to the passing piece. I was attached to the,
That's another thing. Yeah. Let it be part of the process.
yeah. And
Yeah,
then
that
if
works.
I needed longer, I had longer. I wasn't giving myself a timeline. I'm going to share a
And
story.
you would take the feedback as value out of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you'd mine it for the resource that it is, where you're getting hooked or where you're not showing up in presence or partnership or any of the things that happen. So I'm going to share just a little bit of speaking of transparency, a story that involves you. I had just gotten my MCC on Wednesday, and I go and I'm in a coaching demonstration on Saturday in a fishbowl. And you're one of the mentor coaches who's giving feedback on this coaching demonstration that I'm doing. And I think it was myself and there was another coach there. But I remember getting so overwhelmed in the coaching conversation with the client who volunteered to be the client. And I got completely stuck. Now, I had gotten my MCC, but I had this, I just sort of froze in that conversation with all those eyes around me.
Yes.
And it was so funny afterwards, Fran. I don't know if you remember this, but I said, that was really hard. I got really stuck. And you said to me, what was the language that you used? Everybody has you didn't use this language, but like they shag up, completely mess it up sometimes. And I was like, what? Wait, did I fail? Wait a minute, what happened? And I just remember laughing so hard when you said that to me, because it reminded me not to take any of this stuff too seriously.
Oh.
And
Well, I don't remember that, Lisa, because I don't like to hear that I normalized for you.
but no, it was really important for me because I think there is this thing that gets attached to this idea of MCC and not seeing it as a mile marker, but as some sort of end goal. And for me, it was a really huge reminder that the MCC is a certification. It's a great certification and it shows something. And boy, do you need to, there's a lot of that internal self journey that happens in order to get.
Absolutely. That's what it is.
And
Yeah.
yet we're still just students of a practice.
Right? I'm reminded, Lisa, of when I was ballroom dancing and taking lessons. And I saw this track. Now, I couldn't afford to go on it, so I never did. But I saw this track of competing, of working with, instructors and competing, because it was a track to run on for the learning process, the continual learning and skill building.
Yeah.
And the whole time I fantasized about doing that until I found out what it cost for all those gowns and lessons and everything, travel.
Like this.
That was not happening. But the fact that it was a track to run on for the skill development that I wanted for myself, to continue that continuous improvement. And I think of that quite often with my mentees, that going for the certificate, and I don't work with anyone who just wants a certificate. They've got to have a motivation, for their personal growth. Or I actually don't take them on as clients. It's just not enough of a motivation, to actually get you through what it takes. It's not.
Yeah, it's a piece of paper. I mean, that's all it is. It's a piece of paper. It's the work that goes underneath that piece of paper that's what's important, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah.
And to that point, the piece of paper doesn't really matter. It just becomes something that just is an indicator, a mile marker on a journey. So I know that you started to allude to what you're working on and what you're doing in the world. When people come to see you, what things are you up to in the world?
Well, I'm actually, now you mentioned my sweetie, I have a whole new lifestyle, and I'm wanting to reallocate my work-life balance and have more time for our travel, our weekend road trips, and more time in my day for living with a life partner. And so, yeah, I'm slowing down and having more life and travel and fun. And yeah.
That is so wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I will be putting links below the podcast, and people can come and find you. But I will say how honored I am that you came on the podcast, and thank you so much for being in the coaching studio.
Thank you. Thank you. What a pleasure. And I love sharing my stories. So that was fun.
And you're very good at it also.